Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And as time yesterday that I don't block our special guest. My name is Yinka Peterside. I'm the founder of Artex Lagos, and I welcome you all here today. This is a really exciting occasion for us to have the privilege and the opportunity to have Mr. Yinka Shonibare, someone that I now count as a friend and a mentor. MBE. Oh, yes. Yes, Mr. Yinka Shonibare, MBE, here with us in Lagos today. As you would have seen downstairs, we have a very special project celebrating his career highlights on the ground floor as you walk into Artex Lagos. He is our keynote artist for the year, and I'll tell you very briefly what that means. At Artex Lagos, we are consistently looking to inspire. And you are very well aware that there are a number of eminent Africans around the world, within Nigeria, within the continent, and around the world who are doing exceptional things and of whom we should all be so proud. Each year we try to celebrate one of these individuals, and as such, that is Yinka this year. We're excited to have him here, and the conversation you will hear between him and Chika, as really right, will be very, very special. I'd now like to introduce Mr. Bolaji Balogun, who is the CEO of Chapter. He has taken it upon himself year after year to sponsor this program within Artex Lagos that does seek to do what we described, which is the celebration of our pioneers, the celebration of African excellence. So we will just say a few words very, very briefly, and then we'll move on to the main business and the main matter. Thank you.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, firstly I need to thank Tokini, who continues to provide us the rare privilege of doing this. I said to her that I didn't want to say anything at all today, and the simple reason was that I'm in the presence of someone who's gifted and I'm not. So if you pardon me, please welcome formally Mr. Yinka Shonibare.
So today is the second day of the Artex Talk program. I am Ms. Lusical, the curator of the special projects and the talk sessions. We're very excited to have Yinka here, who's coming from London, and Chika Okeke is coming from Princeton in the US. These two luminaries, each in their own respective practices, are Yinka Shonibare, MBE, who's renowned for his exploration of colonialism and post-colonialism within the contemporary context of globalization. Through his artworks, he offers us sharp political commentary, which I'm sure that Chika will tease out in the session this afternoon. Chika is an artist, curator, critic, and art historian who is a professor of African and African diaspora art and director of graduate studies in the Department of Art and Archaeology at Princeton University. Please join me in welcoming them to have the conversation with them.
It's such a pleasure to be here this afternoon in Lagos, which always remains home. The thrilling and throbbing city of Lagos with resurgence, as it were, of art and cultural production in the past couple of years. And Artex is one of the marquee events that have catalyzed this development. And it's such a distinct pleasure to have to come to Lagos with my midterm break to have a conversation with Yinka, who I've worked with for a number of years in projects across the world, and to have to come back home, as it were, to engage in some discussion and conversation about his work, and show that many of us here recognize how distinctive and how incredibly important his work has contributed to the development of what today we call contemporary African diasporic art. That Yinka is one of those signal artists that have helped shape how we think and talk about this field. And so we're here today to have some moment of discussion among two colleagues that admire each other's work. And so doing this here is a very special occasion for me. And so Yinka, you're very welcome. And I say you're very welcome because I think I can claim to be a homeboy Lagosian based on my experience of Lagos. I can say welcome to Lagos. It doesn't matter that we're probably on the same flight. Coming into Lagos. And it's, I think it's a true mark of your dedication to not just your own work, but to contributing to the expansion of what is possible, right? Not just for Nigerian art, but contemporary art globally. So it's such a pleasure to have you here. And so I think we're a storytelling people, right? Nigerians love to tell stories. And so I'm going to try and tell a little bit of story, but of course about your work and about your career and about the past, the present, and how you're imagining the future of both your work and Lagos, because increasingly you have committed time and resources to thinking about Lagos. So we'll cover quite a bit, as much as time allows, right? And in that sense, I would want for us to start with Lagos, right? Because you've been to Lagos, you've lived in Lagos, you've gone away, and you've increasingly been coming back to Lagos. And I think it would be quite necessary to actually begin with memories of Lagos as a young child, a young man, living in Lagos. And I ask this because it also says something about it does not matter where you come from, right? It's what you do with life and career at the end of the day. So I think we can start with memories of Lagos.
Well, the castle. So, where do I begin? I grew up in Nigeria, and just, I guess, memories of growing up in Ilupeju, where I grew up, not too far from the airport, and on the mainland. And when I was young, I used to go to art classes at the Untitled Museum. And I used to do Saturday, weekend art classes. And then I also saw the works of people like Benel, and I wanted to be an artist. I think I became an artist because I was very much a fan of other people's art. So anyway, so I think I became an artist because I was very much a fan of other people's work, other artists. But you can imagine then saying to my parents, I actually want to be an artist. Now that didn't go down too well, because I was meant to be a lawyer, a doctor, do something responsible. And when I was young, I was also a bit of a rascal as well. So that didn't help. I was very naughty. Now, the reason I was actually naughty, as an artist, you have an instinct to always question the status quo. That is almost kind of contradictory to Nigerian culture because you are actually meant to obey your elders. So, but I do have the avant-garde instinct. And the avant-garde instinct is, I'm afraid, non-deferential. So, but you know, I have the memories, yes, of being here.
Yes.
And I was here actually during First Act 77. The first piece of theatre I saw was Ikitomi. And then I saw Pulamigani at the National Theatre. And the National Theatre was, was very bad. Lots of arts and culture. Lagos was exciting in the 70s.
So you describe your encounters at the museum and elsewhere with the work of older Nigerian artists. And then you also describe this experience of having the compunction to tell your parents that you wanted to study art.
And I love Fela Kuti.
Yeah, that's you're just complicating your problem. If I was your parent at the time, I don't know if I'll stop and just you can't do that. You get serious.
Okay, I thought you came proper.
Okay. That's what I just wanted to be sure that you got the right treatment. But at the same time, here you are looking at Benin, who was some figure, right? And I wonder to the extent to which the fact that there were these, it might be few at the time, artists that attracted your attention, if there was any way that just knowing that there were people like Ben and Wong, if that had any impact in shoring up your own personal desires, as it were, about what you wanted to become.
No, there was something else actually, who was in fact very helpful. Even though my father didn't necessarily want me to be an artist, he did actually send me to meet with Mr. Yusuf Grillo.
Yes.
And, I spoke to him, I said I want to do art. And he said, well, just be focused and be serious about what you want to do if you really want to do this. And it won't be easy, but, just stay with it. And I do remember that conversation. Yeah, so, there were people who were quite, supportive and influential.
Yeah. I think this is a very important lesson, right? The fact that you had a Wong who might have been distant, who you did not have a personal direct encounter with. And then on the other hand, there is Yusuf Grillo who could talk to you and say, well, keep at what you're doing, right? And of course, to see where you are in the art world today, have you sort of reflected on what your practice can do to the younger generation, right?
Well, I feel fortunate, and I know that I can actually make a contribution. In London, for example, I have a project space with young artists, and I've run that project space now for 10 years. Many artists have benefited from that space. We've had at least 200 artists showing his face. And
Yes,
you know,
so let me come in there. We'll get to this, the project really, because I think it's tied to your current project here in Lagos, right? This sense of commitment to the careers of other people. But what I just wanted to highlight there is the ways in which, in spite of what we might think about our practice, how our success can willy-nilly impact some young man, woman somewhere who has seen a poster, perhaps even of your work, and seeing where art took you to, right? And how that can deeply impact their work. For instance, depending on what I knew, probably wouldn't have, had time for, a rascally young man. But at the same time, he knew that his practice, his stature as an artist in Nigeria meant a lot to so many people, so many young and aspiring artists. So it's not really a question of whether you actively support it, but by practicing in the best possible and the highest level that you can aspire and attain, how that can change worlds, right, for others. And so having said that, I think let's return to your work a little bit to shift, to take a trip, right, as you did from Nigeria to England. Yeah, right. You ended up in art school after all, right? Yeah. Eventually, you made it to the art school as you desired. Yeah. Could you describe that experience? Because it's one thing for someone like you to say have decided to study in Lagos or in Ibadan or at Nsukka or Zaria and so forth. Could you talk a little bit about your experience as an art student and how that impacted your future work, right, in London?
Well, I'd say it wasn't exactly very easy. You're an artist coming from Nigeria, an African artist, going into London to make work. First of all, I started painting from the nude. Figurative painting, this is traditional for artists. You learn to draw the human figure, essentially. And that's the beginning of your training, and that's what I was doing. In my second year, I just developed sort of political awareness, and I wanted to engage socially. I felt that the kind of traditional art wasn't politically relevant.
And this was in Thatcher's?
Yes, my Thatcher was in Parliament. I wanted to actually engage with the world and engage with what's going on politically in the world. And so I started making work about what was going on in the Soviet Union at the time, the then Soviet Union. Gorbachev was talking about glasnost and perestroika, the change of that. And so I wanted to engage with that. When I lived in Nigeria, my father read Newsweek in Time magazine, Financial Times, so it was no big deal for an African to be engaging with those things. Yes, nothing, Lagos is cosmopolitan. And one of my tutors looked at my work, one of the teachers there, said, well, you're African origin, and yes, I'm of African origin. What's Russia got to do with you? Why are why aren't you producing, traditional African art? You're African, why are you not authentic? Why are you not producing authentic African art? And then I thought, authentic African art. Okay, original African art. What's authentic African art? Then I thought, what's traditional English dance, when they dance around the pole, it's called Morris dancing. So, why aren't my colleagues ever asked to make work about Morris dancing? Why do I have to do this?
No, that's a troublemaker anyway.
All right, okay. So I thought I'd go to Brixton Market in London in search of my authentic Africanness. So I went into this fabric shop in Brixton, and I bought quote unquote some ethnic fabrics. And the so-called ethnic fabrics are actually Indonesian interest fabrics produced by the Dutch. Okay, you want me to do the banana dance? Let's do it. So that's where the whole thing began.
And you started out, mostly with painted forms, right?
Yes.
On canvas, working with the fabric,
Yes.
and with painting, right? For double Dutch and some of the early works, right?
So at this point, let's bring in the importance of art history as knowledge. Because this work is actually a direct conversation with Western and modernist abstraction. So, well, if you want to be an artist, make a read book. Because without book, you don't know what's going on. So the important thing, see, Western abstract expressionism became, it's just, people not actually painting things, they're painting abstraction, they're painting patterns, line and form. Because in Europe, at the time of the Renaissance, people were actually painting figures and people. And as the world became more modern, say, in the 30s, in the 20s, artists decided that we don't want to paint people, we want to paint our inner feelings. So think of it this way, right? Figurative art, they're painting something on the outside. Now, think of yourself on certain days, you've got a certain mood. I want to wear the red dress today, right? It's how you feel, so you wear the red. So the artists, they paint what they feel inside, right? Yeah. So their inner feelings. So it's not actually real things to look at. And that was good because it was a way to challenge what the other artists did before. That was okay. But what then happened? That art then became, it became sort of white male art. It became very snobbish and high art. And so people who wanted to be posh would make abstract painting. Right? So, and then it became white people's art. So the abstract painting forgot about me, the African, I'm not there. Right? A woman is not there. And these paintings they're often really quite big. And they're in modern art galleries.
Yeah.
Now, the periods, sorry about the history, but it's important. Please don't fall asleep. so anyway.
So I think there are two things happening here. On the one hand, you had a challenge from one of your teachers to identify yourself in the work that you did. And you found the fabric, the so-called African fabric.
Yeah.
On the other, you also engaging with art history.
Yes.
Right, which was exclusionary.
Yes.
Because abstraction was almost assumed to be a white male mode of expression.
Exactly.
And so there were two challenges that we were confronting with this choice.
Yes.
Precisely because you could have gone a completely different direction, at least at that time,
Yes.
to use them to make figurative paintings.
Yes.
Because that's what would have made sense to your teachers, because that's what a black artist would have done.
Yes.
And so here we're dealing with a doubly radical gesture.
Yes.
Right, with these supposedly simple, popular, because you're also dealing with the fact that rather than work with canvas
Yes.
and your oil paint and so forth, you're working with something you bought in Brixton.
Exactly.
Right, so there are all these layers.
Popular culture.
Yes.
That comes into high art.
Yes.
And the popular culture from the market. But this, at the same time, I cannot talk about art without talking about the books I was reading.
Sure.
So I was coming into contact with people who are writing books about post-colonialism. Right? Now we got our independence in Nigeria. Now that didn't happen by mistake. Nigeria got its independence because people fought for the independence. And there are writers who write about this process of becoming free. And so this is post-colonial theory. So I read Edward Said. He wrote a book called Orientalism. And then there's Frantz Fanon.
Yes, black skin, white man.
Black Skin, White Mask. He wrote a book about challenging the West, challenging the colonial, the colonial
ideology.
It's very important for us to understand that my work is directly linked to our own history.
And that's where we come to the shift that then happens in your work from the sort of painterly gestures that we see in Double Dutch a few moments ago to the transition to the sculptural.
Yes.
Right, that then became your signal mode of expression. And I think
But I want to hold that. Sorry to pull you back. It's very important.
Sure.
I will keep talking about politics
Yes.
because this is important.
Yeah.
And also, what's important about this is in '68 there was the Vietnam War, and there were lots of protests around Europe, and feminism also.
Yes.
involved.
Comes up at around the same
Yes.
time.
And after Martin Luther King, so then you had in the United States, you had the Black Power movement in the 70s.
Yeah.
Now, the Black Power movement, feminism, all of those things were there to actually challenge the system, where black people were not being given opportunities, were not being given. So what I do with my sculpture, I'm actually reversing. So I take all the images representing the colonial powers. I introduce this fabric into it.
So in other words, you're retroactively corrupting what was already thought to be a clean, linear, unquestionable history.
Yes.
That was, as Achebe, used to say, history is the story of the hunter, right? And not the lion, because the lion is dead, right? Or the story of the lion, because the antelope is not there to tell its own story. And so history that we were taught, history that we assumed was the history, was the story of the European and their cousins elsewhere.
Yes.
And so and of course, when you think about the way that these agents of history were represented, it was often in their national period costumes.
Yes.
And so in making this critical decision at the time to take this same supposedly African fabric, right, to corrupt, I keep insisting on that word, to corrupt this history, right, that in itself is a way of acknowledging your presence, the African presence in that history that has been denied.
Yes.
Right?
And it's also about turning that power upside down.
Sure.
And that's why I cut their heads off.
Yes. So, and here we have you thinking about the French Revolution, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, the
When you
guillotine.
reach people, overindulgence in France in the 18th century, nice houses, nice cars.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't have cars.
Well, things that could have been nice cars of today, right?
Fine homes, fine carriages.
Yeah.
Well, the people rose up, chopped their heads off with a guillotine.
The violence that this sort of implies, I think is redemptive violence, if you ask me. But I also have been thinking about this, whether we think of the, population you don't get head, right? Meaning you're just a stupid person, right? Or even to think in terms of, let's say, the Yoruba sense of, inner and outer head, right? The outer head, which is the one that has been taken up, is really not that, it's the inner one that is the thing. And so this idea that they don't have head, both the inner one and the outer one, suggests a fundamental philosophical critique. It's not just simply that you cut their heads, which is a physical thing. It's that you're denying them of this condition of humanity, right? That is underwritten by this idea of the inner head, right? So I see something that is quite, critically radical happening in this decision, right? To remove their heads.
Because we must not talk about this.
Yeah.
We're not talking about postmodernism and post-structuralism. Because, you see, modernism, especially in the cities and the post-industrial age, if you see a building, it's without, modernism is really kind of universal, right? And it's sort of empty, it's just lines and all that. Form is very important.
Yeah.
And innovation is also very important. But you see, with postmodernism, you bring the history of the people back into the art.
In all its complicatedness, in all its multiple layers.
And the hybrid that comes in. And but culture is now coming back, it's present, you can see it. So you artists, listen now. You have to bring your culture.
Yes, but it's also not culture of the illustrative kind.
No,
right? That
no, it's complex.
This is my people.
No,
this is the
no.
honor of Benin. So I'm
No.
not right?
No, that's
that
not
it's an engagement in the subjectivity, not culture as a shaper of subjectivity.
Yes,
right.
but recognizing all the different aspects of it.
Yes, because of course it's when we stereotype culture that we reduce them to, so you're Nigerian, so you're Edo,
Exactly.
and as if you know what that means, even though people are going to want to kill and die for that.
That's where hybridity comes in.
Yeah.
And by hybridity, I mean bringing different aspects of your life, in your culture. You could like Japanese food, you may be crazy about Japanese culture. If you're African, there's nothing stopping you from adding that Japanese aspect of your work, of your life, or into that work. You see, and the stereotyping suggests that we Africans, we have never seen anything else. We've never had pizza or Indian food. But actually, we don't only want to eat that, we want to try other things.
Yeah, and it's even there's even a historical sense of this. I have had colleagues who've done research on this, that you find across West and Central Africa, especially societies that are along the coastlines, like the Kingdom of Benin, because the empire spread to the coast, or the Ashanti Empire and so forth. There you have all these secret languages that are supposed to be spoken by some, either royal or cultic elites and all of that. And these are supposed to be ancient, languages that ordinary folks don't actually understand them, and they are authentic, right? Well, it just turns out that some research that has been done finds that across many of these languages, there were actually Portuguese, Spanish, that they have appropriated over the centuries of trading with the Portuguese, and incorporated these into these supposedly secret languages. That's why they are secret, because they're actually not from there, right? And so even the most authentic, supposedly authentic aspects of our cultures have been hybridized. They're thinking about this notion of hybrid, right? Which is what makes the discussion about authenticity so fraught. Right? That when you scratch deep down, you find that things have come from elsewhere through time and incorporated into what we think of as our authentic cultures.
But this is also socially very important, because we have to think about the history of Europe, and we have to think about what happened during the Second World War and the problem of the Holocaust. Now, stereotyping, Jewish people were stereotyped, which actually led to genocide. And so that's why you mustn't stereotype somebody because they're from a different tribe. And we saw what happened in Rwanda. So we're talking about very simple things, but they can lead to actually very dangerous things.
So let me ask you, what's going on in this image? What's Yinka Shonibare dressed in this?
Living large.
No, I think there's something else going on.
On a more serious note, if you see any, images of the 19th century, and you saw a black person in that image, they would never be in that position. They'd be the valet, they'd be
holding something,
butler, they'll be, you can look at Hogarth paintings from the 18th century, it's the same thing. And so, I produced a series of works. I called it Diary of the Victorian Age. And so I produced a series of pictures for the London Underground, so huge posters, reconstructing a day in the life of an imaginary person. Who was the dandy? The dandy is a well-dressed person.
who usually has money.
Yeah, and Oscar Wilde would have been described as a dandy. So that's what I did. Now, this was actually the thing that got me, one of the projects that got me really well known. Sure. Because people were kind of shocked. What's that? People thought that, is it a film? Is it, did this guy in their scenes? This is what I mean by producing things kind of outside of the box. I did this project in 1998, but it had a really huge impact. The newspapers wrote about it and so on. But this is another, it looks beautiful and everything, but it's deeply political.
Sure. I think that's why it got the attention that it did, because here's this young, dashing black man, the center of activity, adorable, at least to these white women surrounding him, reaching out for him, and all these people he's the center of attraction, even though on the walls are supposedly these patriarchal figures, but they're all white, right? So you wonder what this black man, who the hell is he, right? To be in this space that he is not supposed to be in, if at all he should be the servant. Right? And so here you have a moment, I should just say this, that was akin to the Ben and Wong portrait of Queen Elizabeth that was thought to have been Africanized by Ben and Wong. The reason it became such a critiqued work was simply this fear, this anxiety that the Queen was now being made to look like some African woman, right? So it's that you're insinuating your African self into this hallowed, space, right, of white elite life, right?
And you see, it was very important to do this project at the time because in London at the time, a group of black artists, got themselves together. It was called the Black Art Movement, trying to change the system. And there were people like Keith Piper, Eddie Chambers, and Sonia Boyce, yes, so those are the names of the artists. But that felt very much that I want to place myself at the center. I want to be in the mainstream. I want to do projects where other white artists do their projects. I don't want to be on the margins. And so I always did things in unexpected places. And big, large scale, unexpected things, very expensive.
Yes. And talking about expensive, because these things, making projects like this are not easy in terms of the resources that you have to marshal, that you have to put together to create, right? And you cannot get there if you do not imagine an ambitious practice, right? That will then make it possible to create the type of work that will garner attention, not because it's noisy, right? As is often the case, artists think that by making noisy work, you get attention, rather than, very deeply engaging work, right? So, could you describe your experience creating projects like this? Or, your really ambitious projects such as the work that you showed at the moment, what it takes to produce work like this and the kind of ambition that calls for?
Well, you just have to be good at smooth talking. People are going to leave you alone. You have to be confident. And you have to tell them the project is going to be the best thing that they've ever seen. Even though you're nervous inside, it doesn't matter. I think it's just a question of determination and confidence. You write a proposal, and you have to understand why you're doing what you're doing. And also, you see, a lot of my works can't really be fully understood if you don't understand art history, and if you don't understand the context of art, if you don't understand, the idea of conceptual art, starting from Marcel Duchamp, that you can take a ready-made, right, and you can do something with it. Now, Marcel Duchamp is a French artist. He showed a urinal as a work of art, and it was radical at the time. And he was the first person to show that you can actually take an object that's already been made, so that the work is there not about creating skill and craft. The work is about the idea, and that's called conceptual art. So, and my work is kind of taking this conceptual art forward. I'm adding aesthetics to it, but the starting point is kind of conceptual art. And some of the ideas in the work are, quite important.
There's something also quite political, right, about gallantry and criminal conversation, right? Here we see these.
By the way, criminal conversation is adultery.
Well, that's and the Victorian age was an age that was, stupefyingly moralistic.
If there are children in the room, you better move that forward.
But I think the point that I was, the point that I'm making is that here you have, for quite a while, engaged with the Victorian age, and this was an age of, what I just described as stupefyingly moralistic age, and basically taking it apart, because this was also the age of empire.
Yes.
This was the age of colonization of other people, even though it was supposedly to be this, genteel, moralistic, and all of that. And so it's almost as if you're inserting a dynamite, right, into this history to show them up for what they are. That
Absolutely.
They were moralistic, indulgent, ethical,
Yeah.
they were highly indulgent,
Exactly.
and so forth.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's what then leads us to one of your best known work,
Yes.
Scramble for Africa.
Yes.
Right? How did this come about? And
Well, I was generally just reading the history of colonialism in Africa, and I came across the Berlin Conference. What was that conference?
1884, 85.
1884.
November to February.
So a number of about 14 European countries, they got together. They decided to share Africa amongst themselves. So you can have that country, Belgium can have this, the French can have that, the British can have that. But they didn't ask any of the people if they were okay with that. And then they put us into the mess that we're in today. They created all these countries. And so, and in my opinion, I saw them as brainless people, really. So I kind of tried to reimagine that conference.
Yeah, it's quite.
And there is rancor, there is rancor,
That's what I find. This was, of course, in the Berlin show that we worked on in 2010. Who knows tomorrow? And when you see the contemporary illustrations of this event, it's all these well-dressed men, behaving properly, and sipping their wines, and when in fact, when you read the accounts of what went on there, it was post-trading, basically.
Yes, yeah.
Belgium
was terrible. King Leopold.
Yeah, King Leopold was actually the reason they organized this thing, because he just wanted to claim the Congo as the so-called Orange Free State. That was his personal property. And he
they used to chop people's hands off.
Yeah, he ran the place from the 1880s. By the time Belgium as a state took the territory away from him, by most accounts, the population decreased from 20 million to 10 million. And so you're talking about the most terrible genocide, in the history of mankind. That level of depopulation, because he ran this territory. And so the events that led up to this, they were killing each other anyway, and they just needed to settle, okay, you own this place, so don't come worry me about my own territory, and so forth. And that's how we have what we have today. But I think that in the way that you designed and conceptualized this project, there's a sense in which there's chaos, not just even their sartorial, attires and everything. Because when you see the contemporary illustrations, they're all wearing black, like your black tie dinner, everyone's wearing the same thing. But here, the dresses introduce this level of discord, both in their gestures and in their attires. So I think that this was one of the really powerful statements about the Victorian age. And then we come to this, that I often say this is like the Beyonce and Jay-Z of Lagos in 1860s and 70s. Which says something about this town, about Lagos, that Lagos was at some point a Victorian city. And so, which is why when your teacher in London says, you should be an African, you should paint like an African, doesn't know that you're from Lagos, that was as cosmopolitan as his London, right? Assuming he's from London, anyway. But I think that he says something about how, crucially important Lagos was as a cosmopolitan city.
And she was Queen Victoria's godchild.
Yes. I remember reading a Lagos Weekly Record announcement of the birthday gift from Queen Victoria for Sarah Davis's first child. I'm sure maybe some of us here are descendants of this couple. But she was married to, by the Queen. The Queen arranged the marriage because Davis was, wealthy, dashing, really guy that came in from Lagos. And the Queen thought, he should be the one to marry my goddaughter. And marries both of them, and they come back to Lagos and became, of course, the grandparents of some of the biggest nationalists, for independence. So it's almost like the circle, returns that she, the goddaughter of the Queen of England, became the grandmother of one of the foremost nationalists, right, from out of Lagos. So you have not just made sculptures and paintings or installations, you've also engaged with performance and works such as the masked ball.
Yes.
Right? Could you describe quickly how you came to this moment, moving across media and modes of expression?
Well, for a start, I get bored very quickly. So I want to push myself as an artist. Not just doing the same thing all the time. And I want to push the boundaries of my practice. And of course, as you know, video has been a big part of contemporary art. Artists are making, many different artists. And so I was in a residency in Stockholm for about 6 months. But while I was doing that residency, the Iraq war was going on at the same time. And then I also came across the story of Gustav III. He was fighting wars in Russia while his people in Sweden. Sweden was a very poor country at that time. They were starving, he loved going to the ball, and then there was a plot to assassinate him. So then he went to the ball and he was shot by the ball. And so I wanted to recreate that. But actually, in a funny kind of way, the work actually was about the war in Iraq. But the war in Iraq was the starting point for that project. But then when I also wanted to see if I could go to Stockholm, because I didn't take my costumiers, I didn't take anybody. I just went there, I auditioned people, and we did the project. And and that was very challenging for me. But I like doing that without going there with any of my own kind of resources. But then, as I was, trying to make the film, I was asking myself a lot of questions about, gender and gender politics. And so I decided to change both the assassin and the king into women. So that's when you see. But it was a kind of. So that was it was actually a critique of cinema. So art is not just about subject matter. It's also about engaging with the form in which you're doing it. Do you understand?
Yeah. Yes. So thank you for that. We're coming close to the end of this event, but before then, we're going to take some questions. I think we're open to that, and we have some written questions that we can entertain. But I'll be remiss if we don't end with your project in Lagos, because I think this is crucial. It's really, really important, yes, that we get to that one way or the other. Okay, so can we take questions?
Please don't feel rushed. Keep speaking. We're going to collect the questions and we'll give them over to you.
Okay, so I think we should get to that. Yes, and because I think it's really important to think about what you've done and what you're doing for Lagos, because it's such an admirable. So you started talking about the London project earlier and how that's connected to what you're trying to do in Lagos.
Yes. So this is a view of my studio in London. And in that studio, I have a small gallery for young artists. But we do projects, all kinds of projects. It's called guest projects. And so I've been doing that for 10 years. So people send their proposals, and then they get the space, and then they're able to show their work. Because in London, it's very hard for young artists to find a space to actually show their work and support them in that way. And so, I was invited to Lagos by BC Silva first time. And I did a talk in Lagos. And that was great, I enjoyed it. The second time I was invited to by the British Council, and I showed the sculpture, one of my unique sculptures here.
Sure.
And
So
then,
this is, yeah.
So one of those sculptures I showed in Lagos. Yeah, the one
That's on the right.
And then, and then I thought, I've been doing a project in London for young artists for 10 years. I'd like to do something here in Lagos. And so about 5 years ago, I acquired some land in Lekki. And so I'm going to build an international artist residency space in Lagos to bring artists here, international artists to engage with local artists. And the project will be in 2 parts. And the other ambitious part of it is going to be sculpture part and farm. And
That's what you're calling inspiration from.
well,
For now.
that's the working title.
Yes.
That's the working title. So, because some artists want to work outside, and also it will be good to do something I want the space to be a productive space. So they will, hopefully produce food there that the residents can kind of eat. So the space will also be a nice space to, for conversation. There'll be a gallery and there'll be a platform there for conversation, for cultural exchange, and it will be, so there's on the one hand a lovely kind of open outside space, and then a small residency space in the city. But the space in the city will only be 3 bedrooms outside, but hopefully we can accommodate more artists on the farm site. So that's kind of the rough
Outline.
yeah.
I think I can't say enough how important this is. given the really bad situation in Lagos in terms of spaces for contemporary art. When you mentioned this project, I was like, okay, finally something different will happen in this town. And I'm saying this because contemporary art in Lagos will keep going round and round outside of course, the kind of events that we're here today, the art eggs and the auctions and so forth. But there's a critical industry that has to be in place if contemporary art in Lagos can take that necessary step.
And based, I agree with you, and based on what we talked about before, you can't just be painting. What are you painting? You start painting. No, you see that you need a platform for debate. When people criticize your work, you should not get aggressive about that or be angry about that. Because actually criticism moves your work forward.
Yes.
It's not a place to be angry. You need peer review. And platforms where you can talk, you can debate, you can compare your work to the works of other artists. And that's why I feel very strongly, that's why I want to do what I want to do in Lagos, to bring other artists here. And those artists can also learn from the local artists here. So it's an exchange. Since I've been here, I've learned a lot myself. I can't say in London thinking I know everything, I don't. So it's good to actually be here, see the work of other artists, go back, learn something. And because, unfortunately, because of the imbalance of power, the traffic has always been from us to the West. No, we need to bring them here. They need to come and learn something.
Yes. And so before we start with the questions, I need to re-emphasize this point that we don't have to wait for artists like Yinka, who has made this kind of commitment. There has to be the energy from within, to actually do things differently, but in a much more meaningful way in terms of creating the spaces, more than anything else, creating the space for exhibition, for articulation, for debate. They have to happen in spaces and not necessarily in hotels, where you rent the space for a day and you run out of money, which is often what happens, or you rent a space for exhibition and you can't go on for more than a week because of how much you're paying. Without spaces dedicated to art, it's going to be very difficult for art to thrive in this town, beyond where it is already. There's potential, and that potential is yet to be, attained. So let's take the questions, or at least some of the questions. The first one says, we don't have any of your works in Nigeria. Wind sculpture in Central Park, London, another major piece in London. Any places for work in a public space here in Lagos? So that's the question. Take that.
Well, I hope all the rich guys are listening. I agree.
Yes. Yeah, Yinka's work should be in Lagos. But there's a saying, there's this Igbo saying that it says, Ada Abaka Afumateze. And that is to say that when you go to see a teething child, you don't go empty-handed. So if you want Yinka Shonibare's work in Lagos, you got to do what it takes to get Yinka Shonibare's work in Lagos. That's it. Okay, the other question, what is the greatest challenge you have encountered in the production of the work?
It's, as you can see, I do have physical challenges, I have physical disability. And, but that should not really stop whatever you want to do. I think that, challenges are opportunities. there are opportunities for you to think differently, to think about, it's problem solving. And so if you come across a barrier, it can actually make you more creative. And in a way, I actually try to take all of my challenges as opportunities.
Okay.
Yeah.
This should be a fairly simple answer. What do you see as your greatest achievement? I said it's going to be a simple answer. You do that.
I mean, it's difficult, but in terms of art, I think that having my work in Trafalgar Square, on the 4th floor in Trafalgar Square,
Yeah, I wanted to show, but yeah, please, let's have the.
because I was told that about approximately 1 million people are now using that.
Yes, so that's the 4th.
Yeah, the 4th.
Yeah. Nelson in a bottle. I was going to ask you, how the hell did you get this thing? Let's leave that for.
Well, I'd have to kill you if I don't.
Yeah, I'm good. You can kill me so that I can kill me and they know. So looking back, what would you say are the greatest? You are grateful to the. Would you say that you're grateful to the teacher of yours that suggested that you do something supposedly attuned to your African background?
Well, I think that my bank manager is more grateful.
Okay. What do you think of the art from back then to the art of the 21st century?
What do I think of it from back then?
Yeah, I'm not sure where back then. Yeah, I'm trying to be diplomatic.
Okay, no, well, no, on a more serious note, that question might be about the relationship between traditional art and contemporary art.
It could be that.
So if we assume that that is the case, then we don't necessarily need those dichotomies. You don't need to divide that up. You can take what past, you can mix it with the present, and create something new.
Yeah, I think basically you've been talking about this critical awareness of history and engagement with history. So back then is now, right? In the way that the present is informed by the past, and
Yes.
the past is, the present is the material for inventing futures.
Yes.
Right? That what he thinks about the back then is already embedded in his work, in his engagement with history and histories as a complicated and fraught place. So there's this question, you spoke about conceptual art. What is the process of generating original ideas that address real issues, distilling them and producing them in an art form? I think this person is describing your work. So it doesn't sound like a question. He or she is asking what is the process of generating original ideas that address real issues, distilling them and producing them in an art form.
Well,
So
that process is knowing what other people did before, which means being opening your eyes, seeing what other people are doing, and then trying to make your work in relationship to those things. But you don't have to copy them. It has to be, you have to add something. There's no point having a professor and you're just copying his work.
Yes, yeah, you probably should be talking to the professors and the students here in Nigeria. Yeah.
Now, be careful now. We're both JJC.
Yes.
So,
Yes. Well, that's actually why I do that.
JJC.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful.
Yeah. So I don't get demoted. Okay, so it's been a pleasure, right, to get to do this, as I said at the beginning, and in Lagos, because we do these things all over, you know, what can seem like the moon, but to have to do this in Lagos is such a wonderful, pleasant experience. Thank you all so much for attending.